newspapers, the major headlines, the big talking points. This is Freshly Pressed. It is a Tuesday morning, the 9th day of December, 2025. And this is yours truly, Ayokunmi Kekerekon, with you. It is a great Tuesday. Thank you for joining us and being a part of proceedings. It is always an interesting time when you join us to share your thoughts on the stories that we'll be talking about. You get to send those messages in and give us your takes, your perspectives, your views. Hey, we love to hear from you each and every single time. So all you need to do is relax and send those messages in to us on WhatsApp or leave a comment on YouTube as well. The WhatsApp number it's 0911 999 0981 Follow us on YouTube and keep up with the live stream at Smooth 981 FM Lagos. Smooth 981 FM Lagos. All right, joining me this morning to take a look at the stories and, of course, give some analysis and make some sense of everything, really. Mr. C is in the building. Chibuzor is in the building. Good morning to you, Chibuzor. How are you doing today?
Good morning. How am I doing today? The day will tell its story at the end of the day. So
It's still too early for you.
it's too early. It's too early.
Well, fingers crossed it's going to be a great one. Mr. C, good morning to you.
Buenos días, damas y caballeros. Bienvenidos al espectáculo.
All right. I guess Mr. C just made his way back from foreign sojourns. Good morning to you too, Mr. C. Great to have you on the show and welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, let's get this show on the road this morning. So let us begin in Niger State. And the Vanguard is the paper where this is coming from. And the story says around 100 school children who have been kidnapped from a Catholic school in Niger State last month have been received by the state governor. They were handed over to government officials a day after authorities secured their release. Now, the children, many of them wearing football jerseys and girls in long robes, were driven into the Niger State government house in white buses escorted by a dozen military vans and armored vehicles. Now, the release of the students who were kidnapped 2 weeks ago was facilitated by the federal government last night. Now, dozens of the 315 students and staff who were abducted from the school in north central Niger State are still missing, and 50 others they had escaped shortly after the raid. Well, we have another 100 students whose release have been secured by the government. How, we don't know, but we're thankful that they've been released and they were received by the Niger State governor. You know, this whole business of the governor receiving them and all that. I don't know. Is it a must? It has to happen on one hand, and secondly, the questions that are still being asked. What was done to actually facilitate said release of the students?
Oh, okay, so just gonna take a step back. My first point on this story is to look at the Vanguard, and I would like media sources and agents to hold themselves to a higher standard. When you said about, well, I think there's given a number about 315 students who are killed and staff were abducted, and you said 50 have 50 escaped, hundreds were returned, then why we see dozens of the 315 are still missing? Give us a specific number of who is missing. This is one of my many peeves with reporting in Nigeria, and even how, when we don't put a human face to it, we talk as if people are not to be counted, or we don't, those people don't have families, they're just statistics. Give us specific numbers on who is still missing, who is not at home today with their families and their friends and their loved ones, who is not enjoying the luxuries of their beds or in whatever form it is at home, and having to sit under captivity, not sure what tomorrow would bring or next few hours of their lives would be. That puts this issue right front and center in front of anybody who wants to pay attention. You can't keep asking people to do the maths of who is out there and who's still there. If we were in a hurry to rejoice over the 100 that have been returned, we should also be able to please focus on the ones that are still missing, so that hopefully when they come back, we can know how many are left, or if everybody else is still left. So I would like the media, the Vanguard and whoever is reporting stories like this, to be a bit more specific. Let's stop clouding around with dozens of, a number of, See, let's not play around with the English language, no matter how it is. Let's be specific. Now, I always the thing about the government wanting to receive them. See, this is political season. The Nigerian, I wanted to use the word leadership. The Nigerian leadership have shown us that everything lies and rests on a table of politics, and PR is part of politics, and that's why I even emphasize the lack of numbers of those who are missing. The governors have come out to celebrate 100 have been returned, but still a large number of people are still missing. So while we celebrate those who have been returned, the question should be asked by the families of those who have not returned: when is my loved one coming back? What are you doing to bring them back? That is the single responsibility you owe your citizens. When we sort that out, then the next question is, how did this happen in the first place? How can we stop this from happening in the future? Until we answer those questions, until we seriously want to answer those questions, you know, all we'll do is that if we keep doing this in cycles, and we've been doing this in cycles for over 15 years, that's why it's not big news for people again when hundreds are kidnapped, or when a number of kidnapped or dozens are still missing. It's no longer news. It's become part of our everyday normal life, and it should not be so. It shouldn't be so. This is a period where a lot of people should be coming back home or traveling across the country into to go and celebrate, go and rejoice with their families after a hard, long year. But a lot of people are afraid to even step out of their homes to get on the roads because they don't want to be like the dozens that are still missing. And this is not just about the northeast or the north central or the northwest. It's about almost every part of the country.
Unfortunately.
So it's something that we need, and the governments need to ask themselves the questions: are we, when we beat over ourselves and politicians fight over, everybody's fighting over crumbs on the table, who actually gets the value? So yes, for the families and the friends and the relatives of those who have been released, and the boys who came back in jerseys and the girls who came back in robes, I'm sure they're thanking their gods and appreciating the fact that they've been returned. But this doesn't remove the blush of this on the notes of the governors and the guys who were in charge of the security in the first place. It doesn't erase the fact that they were kidnapped in the first place. Rejoice for the regaining them back. Like I said, there are still loads of people who are missing, and this doesn't erase the fact that there was a failure of the state to protect its citizens when this happened, and there's a continuing failure of the state to protect its citizens on a daily basis while things like this continue to happen.
All right. Well, thank you, Chibuzor. And when you have governments at all levels, be it national or subnational, that excel in opacity, non-accountability, non-transparency, these are the sort of stories you will continue to encounter. Nobody has bothered to explain how 315 individuals were moved from one location to another. So when Chibuzor says, "Oh, it will be good for this not to happen again," it will be, yes, I agree, but we need to understand the how and the why. Now, this business of secured the release, what does that mean? This is not a football transfer you're trying to sort out.
It might have been.
This is not a transaction you're trying to close.
Might have been.
Might have been. We don't know.
So where we have a situation where the authorities cannot even explain what they have done without details, it just calls into question a lot of things. And again, the eternal abiding question: what is the value of a Nigerian life? Whether to the citizenry or to the authorities. What is there to suggest that this will not happen again? Now, why the governor had to host it, there were speculations they were never missing. So this was like proof of life in a sense.
Yep.
Okay, you say 100 people were not taken. Okay, we've assembled 100 people here. Now, it's instructive that none of them was allowed to speak. I'm not sure if they spoke about the experiences wherever they were taken to. But like Chibuzor rightly said, there's still others in captivity, not just a particular episode or incident, all over the country. And then you juxtapose what is happening inside the country with what happened over the weekend outside the country. And it then begs the question, what exactly is going on here? If you understand what is going on in Nigeria, you're either strange or it wasn't done properly. Because Nigeria truly is a very, very strange country.
Talking about what happened outside the country, I think that's a good cue to step into that particular story here. We're staying in the vanguard though, and it says that President Bola Tinubu requires at least 14 days to consult the Senate for approval in the event of troops deployment for combat operations in another country. Now, a Senate source who disclosed this to Vanguard yesterday spoke against the backdrop of claims in some quarters that the president needed to seek the Senate's approval 24 hours before or after deployment of troops. Now, this came as two high-ranking Benin Army officers yesterday regained freedom, having been taken hostage by those behind the coup. There's been a whole back and forth over the legality or otherwise of this particular move made by the president. A lot has been said about what went down. There's also the school of thought asking the questions about, oh, you are so swift to respond to what's going on in Benin Republic. Why aren't you so swift to deal with the issues right here in Nigeria, security-wise as well? A lot of questions, Mr. C, but I don't know if we have any answers.
So the answers, the questions definitely. So I'm going to read verbatim a statement attributed to the presidency when it described Nigeria's response to the attempted coup as a demonstration of President Tinubu's leadership in promoting peace and constitutional order across West Africa. That is the statement coming out of the presidency. And there's been no rebuttal, so we have to take it as true. That is just pure hypocrisy right there. Now, the relevant sections of the Constitution as section 5, subsection 4 and 5 of the Constitution. And it says, section 4 says, the president shall not declare a state of war between the Federation and another country except with the sanction of a resolution of both houses of the National Assembly sitting in a joint session and in consequence of aggression by another country upon the Federation or any part thereof. Now, this doesn't apply because there was no war. Now, subsection 5. Notwithstanding the provisions of subsection 4 of this section, the President, in consultation with the National Defense Council, may deploy members of the armed forces of the Federation on a limited combat duty outside Nigeria if he is satisfied that the national security is under imminent threat or danger, provided that he shall, within 7 days of actual combat engagement, seek the consent of the Senate, and the Senate shall thereafter give or refuse the said consent within 14 days. Now, key question here, can anyone in the presidency truly pretend to suggest to Nigeria that Nigeria's national security was under imminent threat by the activities going on or the events going on in Benin Republic? Let these things start to make sense.
Thank you, Mr. C. Finish. Shall I let you finish? And I'll give you my
so people will argue that, oh, there are certain states in Nigeria that share contiguous borders with Benin Republic, like Lagos, Ogun, Kwara. But really and truly, when we're talking of national security here, we're saying an event or series of events which together will affect the balance of security, law, and order within the territory of Nigeria, not within the territory of certain states. Now, the presidency has also maintained that the Benin government asked for help. Now, my question is this. All during that period, no one knew where the president was, the president of Benin. His whereabouts were unknown. Now, who made the request? I get the notion that Nigeria supposedly is still the big brother of West Africa, and we need to display in quote, our perceived strength and superiority. Now, balance this carefully, right? I understand there were a number of tweets during the weekend coming out of Benin. The majority of them were in French, some were in English. Now, even though we did not see large scale protests either in support or demonstrations either in support or against, so we cannot really speak as to what the mood or the position of the Beninois people was. However, this is key. Did Nigeria follow the rules of international law? Yes, according to provisions I read out earlier, the presidency seemed to have acted within the boundaries of the Nigerian constitution. However, that question still remains unanswered. Was Nigeria's national security in imminent threat? Because you have to contrast this carefully. When Tinubu first assumed office, there was a coup in one of our neighboring states, up country,
Niger.
Niger. Then he wanted to also mobilize, but he thought he reconsidered his position. Was our national security also in imminent danger then? Because there are 36 states and the FCT. So we have to be very careful here. And then this business of sovereignty international law. It's convenient when we raise it up, when our big brother says he's coming to straighten us out.
Mhm.
Then we rush out, we remember we're a sovereign nation. Did you remember you were a sovereign nation when you were sending jets to bomb parts of Benin? Well, for now, I will rest my case. But to answer the question, it would appear they did not, provided they scale that issue of imminent threat to national security.
Okay. Because I've had this discussion over the weekend. I know when things were playing out in Benin, even before the deployment of troops, I told somebody that Nigeria was going to deploy troops. It was a no-brainer for me, and I will tell, and I'm going to this minus one of my personal opinions about the presidency. So you did mention the issue about Niger, right? And if you Nigeria basically has three countries bordering it, large. The fourth one is Cameroon, which is in eastern, and they have a long entrenched ruler. You have Niger, you have Chad, and you have Benin. Now, Niger and Chad have swung to the other side a while ago, leaving Benin. Now, given I think some weeks ago we were talking, they were discussing there was a coup, there was no coup. Up till today, there's no official statement. If I was the leader of a country, Nigeria, which is in the center of two other countries that have had recent coups, and there's a third one who's swinging the same side, and I look at the trend of coups in Africa from the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, I would take the fact that if Benin swung into that state, that would become a big incentive for guys within Nigeria to start thinking along the same lines, especially given the alleged rumor of the previous. So I would take an action to stop that from happening.
So self-preservation, not national security.
So you see, it's how you interpret it. I could come out and say,
Can't
you know
it be
what?
both?
I would come out. I come out and defend. If I was the president's spokesman, I would come out and defend and say it's both. That any destabilization of Nigeria today is a threat to national security. So it's either basically equating my own personal security and the security of my government.
No. So
I'm saying I could argue it any way I want to do it, but that is what would be at the mind for me, be at my mind if I was sitting in that seat. So I would do what I need to do to stop it out. The second thing you raised, and it's fair, about nobody knowing where the president was. There's a claim that, and he doesn't have to play a tape in front of anybody. He said, "Hey, I was in contact with the president." He just has to say it. This, in very few countries, they ask him for actual proof. I don't expect the Benin president to show up and say, "Oh, I didn't talk to this man at all, and he just came in on his own." Either it happened or it didn't happen. So I don't see that's as a barrier for him to pass. You say, "Hey, basically we're on a call. I've been in contact with this guy wherever he was hiding, and I had his approval to do this, so I did not cross any lines." So yes, there are very thin lines between what is right and what is wrong in this stance. But I understand. And there were a lot of arguments. I was reading through a lot of stuff on the same day. I was reaching out some of my friends in Benin, and one of the things that you find out from Benin is that is like one of my friends described, there's not unfettered social media access in Benin
Mm.
as opposed to Nigeria, where you can. I try to recall when I was in Benin briefly. I recall there was some, but that's one of the things that you wouldn't really get a full glimpse of what it is. And in terms of, a lot of people say, oh, and the people for or pro against it. I always, when something looks too good to be true, and I speak about the cases in Mali, Burkina Faso, when something looks too good to be true, I always have my red lights on that it is too good to be true. So when people
Okay.
are looking out for people to come onto the streets and rejoice, I cannot speak of any Nigerian coup that did not have some level of support at the start of it. I can't speak to it. I wasn't alive one, but at least I read accounts of most. And every one of them had people coming to the streets to rejoice, celebrate, and afterwards, went to the lamentation phase and said to look to get them out. So if you're human beings are fickle, using human beings to measure, maybe that's why there's the 4-year cycle for elections or 3-year cycle to allow people to actually calm down, drink water, and absorb the repercussions of their
And
decisions
rethink those
and rethink
choices.
these choices again.
So my point when I was talking about the people, why we couldn't gauge or raise the sentiments because we didn't know whether they were for or against. At the end of the day, what is the business of the Nigerian government with a regime change in Benin, whether it's legal or illegal? At the end of the day, it's the Beninois people who will live with that spectacle.
Not so. You see, we can go back and argue back and forth. As long as Nigeria has those two borders with Benin, it's almost like when Nigeria has stability, every country within that sphere would experience, and Nigerians are even worse because the impact will be outside even the sphere. The same thing happens to Benin. When we had the inflow of Ghanaians back in God knows when, it was because of there was some issue. Down if you have any major issue in Benin, you're going to have an inflow. Niger and Chad, it's one of the reasons why I always tell people that dealing with these insecurity issues is always going to be a challenge for every government because our borders really don't exist. And these are states that either you like them or not, there is nobody vouching for anything happening in those countries. People are strolling in, strolling out, coming in, coming out, doing whatever they want to do. So I think let's move on to other stories because we could probably spend the entire day arguing back and forth on this topic.
We probably could have the entire day going back and forth because it's a polarizing conversation, really, not one of those very straightforward ones. Excuse me. All right, Tony Nikeja says, good morning, Ayo and gentlemen. The release of some of the kidnapped students of the Catholic school in Niger State is heartwarming. It'll be better to allow the Catholic diocese in Niger State to continue to update Nigerians on the number of those released and those still in captivity. They were doing that very well earlier before the state government took over and turned it to a soccer fans parade. Nigeria is in the wrong hands. When you link this with the current misadventure on the airspace of Burkina Faso, you'll begin to know the depth of the shame corruption has brought to Nigeria. Yeah, because we were talking about that particular issue before we came on air, the aircraft, Burkina Faso, and all that. It's just a very, very weird situation. Tayo Inacha says, let me borrow relief by welcoming the Smooth FM crew. Good morning to you, Tayo. This government is the obscure of public administration. People go missing, no arrest or no raids, but alas, the Nigerian wonder occurs and they've been released. Miracle no dey tire Nigerian governments like this. Young Leah is still in captivity, and NSA the other day said the captives are fine and doing well. The problem with Nigeria in international politics is the overconsumption of Giant of Africa or Big Brother title. Side note, you can't travel to some of these places and no risk posting on social media that you're in a country's hostile takeover. All right, let's get back into the stories. Let's try to squeeze in a couple of things here before we leave. I'm going to bring both of you in on this particular one. Let's talk about Minister Wike here. Daily Post is where this one is coming from, and it says the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, FCT, Nyesom Wike, has reiterated that President Bola Tinubu will continue to support the judiciary to enhance productivity, reduce delays, and uphold its independence and integrity. The minister disclosed that budgetary provisions had been made to construct additional residential houses for FCT High Court judges to mitigate housing shortages and ensure that all judicial officers are appropriately accommodated. Well, Mr. CIB, it is on the face of it, it is a good gesture on the face of it, but isn't this the wrong messenger? Because I mean, aren't these supposed to be different, completely independent arms of government? Talking about the judiciary, talking about the executive. In an ideal world, I had to add that because you are laughing, Chibuzor. But hey, this is where we are right now, Mr. C. What do you have to say?
So, very quickly, in a serious ideal world, the judiciary is completely separate from the executive, completely separate from the legislature. Welcome to Nigeria, the land of the absurd. Now, you have the executive building houses for judges only in Abuja, which is specific. So they want to build, they're building houses for judges of all the courts. So for the Federal High Court, they want to build houses for all the judges in the Abuja Judicial Division. Same thing as the Court of Appeal, then for all the Supreme Court justices. So on the face of it, one would say, what's wrong with building houses for them? Now, here is the kicker. It would strongly appear that these houses are not for the courts per se, but to the specific individuals. So, for example, if our good friend Ayo here is a judge of the Federal High Court and he's given a house in Itama or Katankwe, when he retires, the ideal thing would be he vacates, he moves
I'm also
out.
just personal residence.
But it would appear that when Ayo resigns, the house has resigned too.
Yeah,
And Ayo's successor now has to find fresh accommodation.
same as the legislature.
Now, all of this will never make sense because the judiciary has a budget. There's a capital section, there's a recurrent section. Minister Wike was talking about building a new Court of Appeal complex. For the love of heaven, what did they put in their budget? So, what constitutes the capital section of their budget, say for 2026, 2025? Now, when the government is buying houses, building houses for specific individuals, and the matters are brought to them that involve the government, are you honestly telling me
What are you gonna do?
that they will not be weighed down by ethical considerations? Are you telling me that they can confidently and boldly deliver judgments against the government?
Against their landlord. I'm going to chime in on this, and it's one of the absurdities of the state. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have houses for judges, you should have houses for soldiers, you should have houses for who needs to have a. But it's one of these things where we have a housing problem nationally. We do, and there's no debate around that. This is the minister through his spokesman, who I would never want to mention his name because it's not worth mentioning his name. Coming out to say they're going to build houses for them. And like Mr. said, there's the big ethical question around that. The judiciary should not just be said to be a separate part of government, but should be seen as a separate part of government. That funding should have made its way into their capital expenditure, their capex planned and approved for the year. They would have to build residences for the officers, such that when they vacate those positions, those residents will remain for the new set of officers, while also ensuring that whoever is in those positions is at least getting a living wage enough, and institutions like the Federal Mortgage Bank or the mortgage institutions and the laws are working appropriately to ensure that these guys at some point can key into this and either start building their own houses or look for their own houses when they leave service. But this entire thing of dropping carrots, and dropping candy for them, like Snow White or one of Little Red Riding Hood, or Hansel and Gretel, just keep dropping these things. And when it comes to the day, you just remind them, I've been good to you, so you should be good to me. You basically put them in a bit of a jam. I'm speaking, I'm speaking, assuming that everybody's independent, and but that is how it looks like from outside. And unfortunately, that's how it has looked to play out over the years, because it now becomes a case for self-preservation. So it shouldn't be a thing, either in the federal capital territory, Abuja, or any state of the country. We should get to that point where the judiciary is able to sit down independently, able to look and provide that balance that's required. Because unfortunately, democracy, on paper, democracy is designed very beautifully. You have all the arms to give, as checks and balances.
Right.
But Nigerian politicians and and as we see in Africa, even even forget Africa now, we're seeing it in other parts of the Western world. Human beings, when they look at systems, have found ways to corrupt systems to make it work the way they want it to work. So the judiciary is, if you are not careful, like what looks seems to happen to the legislature, will become just an attachment of the executive to do as they will.
All right, let me take your messages and run through as many as I possibly can as we need to wrap it up this morning. This is Jerry who says, good morning, Iwa and all. How sovereign is a nation that cannot protect her citizens from foreign terrorists killing, sacking, and hoisting their flags in parts of the country? Sovereign my foot. Jerry is not in that mood this morning, apparently. Rexin Surulere says, if a coup breakdown of order and possible influx of refugees in Nigeria is not a clear and imminent threat to our national security because only 3 states border Benin Republic, I think we need to sift opinions from this table properly before consuming same. Hey, Rexy, sift away. The opinions are diverse.
I'm sorry. No, I'm going to respond. I wasn't going to, but I'm going to respond. If people would only think properly in the morning and not assault people with their stupidity, it would help. What is the population of Benin that you're talking about influx of refugees? What is the total population of the entire country? I think people should think before they send comments.
This is a message from Zikolo who says, good morning, guys. We all know that this government, for obvious reasons, have been pampering the judiciary since inception, starting from that salary increase to other goodies, as if other sectors are not as important. Our teachers lied to us when they taught us about separation of powers. Nothing like that in this country. At least we are all just agreeing that this country is in the wrong hands. Okay, I think I took this one already. Fabian Idekwe says, good morning, gentlemen. The unfortunate movie among our executives in Nigeria continues. I hope the president takes the same initiative and names the supporters and financiers of the terrorists as well as empowers and mandates the military to rout out these terrorists. On another note, doctors and teachers need houses, so they should give us two, unless we will jackpot. Well, I mean, that is a very valid concern, really. Let me sneak one more in. Amadi Nicholas in Ibao just says, dear Smooth Team, wait a minute, which values first? The life of citizens of Benin Republic or Nigerian citizens who keep your office relevant? Well, that is a question I wish I could actually answer, but we need to wrap it up. Thank you very much for the messages and, of course, keeping up. Thank you so much, Mr. C and Chibuzor, for taking the time out to join me this morning. Always a pleasure having you in the studio.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thank you very much. And everybody have a wonderful, peaceful day ahead.
All right, Mr. C.
Thank you, Ayo. Thank you, Chibuzor. Thank you, reasonable Nigerians. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, Lagos, thanks for keeping it tuned. It's Smooth 98.1, 8:15. We'll take a walk into the grapevine and take a look at what's been going on in the world of entertainment and so much more.
Headlines, the stories, the